sin of pride. Because pride, at its core, is a directional sin. Pride is the sin of up, and pride is the sin of in. If you look at Matthew chapter 7, Mark chapter 7, beginning in verse 20 through verses 22, you will read about the Pharisees who have come to Jesus and are complaining that his disciples do not follow their traditions as they ought, and are not washing their hands as they should, and thus they're being defiled by what they eat. And Jesus says back to them, it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out of a man that defiles him. Then he begins to list things that come out of men that defile him. And one of the things on the list of things that defile men is pride. And when we look at the Greek origin of that word that's used in Mark chapter 7, it describes a man who holds his head up high above others. My dad back in Paintsville, he used to say, when he would see folks like that, he's got his nose stuck so far there, if it comes a good rain, he'd drown. And that's the image that we're given with pride. A man who holds his head up high above other people, who have an uplifted heart. Thus, the word here, it shows that pride is the sin of an uplifted heart. We see that very, very easily with the examples of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. Nebuchadnezzar raised up a great statue to himself. He put himself up, exalted himself. And Belshazzar put himself up on a great pedestal above other people. Pride is the sin of putting yourself up above other people. Pride is the sin of love. It's also the sin of in. Look at Luke chapter 18, beginning in verse 9. You see the story of the Pharisee and the publican who both loved to pray. And when they both looked to pray, the Pharisee went first. And the Pharisee said, God, I am thankful that I am not like other men. And I'm not extortioners, or unjust, and adulterers, or like this dirty publican. But I am thankful that I fast twice a week, and I give tithes of all that I have. Jesus says when he looks at this man, that he comes away from his prayer unjustified. Why? Because his prayer was full of pride. He spent the entire time in his prayer talking about how good he was. He looked up to God and all he saw was himself. He could only talk about I and me and mine. And that's why pride is also the sin of in. Because when you are inflicted with pride, you can think not of other people who are around you or of God, but only of yourself, like a bad song you hear on the radio that can't get out of your head, that circulates in your mind. So the sin of pride makes you think only of I, only of me, only of mine. Continuously, all of the time. Pride is the sin of up, putting yourself above other people. We saw that with Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. And pride is also the sin of in, focusing always on yourself. Just as Nebuchadnezzar did when he looked out his window and saw the great city of the earth and only saw his own greatness. Now, none of us have the resources of the power to erect a 9-foot golden statue to yourself. And none of us have the resources of the power to look out our window at Paris and marvel at our own power to control. But the sin of pride is just as great a threat to our spiritual lives today as it was to the kings of Babylon in the days of old. Now look around you, and pride will not be hard to find. Folks, I see pride often. The closest place I can find it is when I look in the mirror. I do something good, and the first thought that comes to my head is, my, what a good job you've done, brother. What a swell guy you are becoming. And as that voice rotates in my head, the devil lays a gold brick on my statue to myself in my soul. Perhaps you've heard that voice too. You've gone to school, you've got an A in your paper, and you look down at that A and you think, boy, I'm the smartest guy in this class. This school is lucky to have me. For those of you folks who go to your jobs, you go to work, you get there early a couple of days, you do a project well, the boss comes and gives you a pat on the back, and you say to yourself, that's right. He ought to pat me on the back, because I'm the best worker he's got. That boss man is lucky to have me. It happens in the church too. You come to worship 2 or 3 times in a row. You help on one of the benevolent projects, the the church has going on, and you sit in a comfortable pew, and you adjust your coat, and you say, my oh my, what a good Christian I am. Jesus is lucky to have me working for Him. Now, when I was prepared for this lesson, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about humility. And as I was thinking about humility, I was trying to practice it better in my own life. And so sometimes I would do something that I would consider humble. And that voice would jump up in my head and say, my Drew, that was humble. You're getting this humble stuff down. That's pride. And we've got to be careful, because as we hear that voice in our head telling us what a great job that we've done and how great we are, the devil lays a brick on our golden statue to ourselves, and we take one more step up on the platform to our own party, for our own greatness. That's pride. Now, we see pride when someone does something good, or gets something new, or accomplishes something, and the first thing they do, instead of getting down and pray to God and thank Him, is run to the highest mountaintop they can find, which in the modern world is often their Facebook account or their computer, and brag to everyone who is around them about what a great thing they've done. It's this boasting element of pride that often we consider to be the most ugly aspect of the sin, but it's also the thing that is most difficult for us to identify ourselves, within ourselves. I've heard it said of pride, that pride is like bad breath. Everybody knows you've got it but you. And I would add to that statement that it tasted good to you and stinks to everybody else. If you look at Matthew chapter 6, beginning of verse 1 and 3, Jesus says, not to be like the Pharisees. Why? Why not be like the Pharisees? Because when they go to do a good deed, they get a big platform. And they stand out in the middle of the street. And then they do what? They blow their trumpet. And they say, everybody look at me. I'm a Pharisee. I'm about to do something good. Now, in some folks' house, when they're growing up, when your kids start to whine, you play them the smallest violin in the world. Now, my house growing up, we took this passage about the Pharisees serious. When you started to talk good about yourself, or start to brag, or boast of yourself, inevitably you hear my brother, or my mom, or my dad, or me give you a little toot to remind you that you were tooting your own horn. You were blowing your own trumpet and letting everybody know, just like the Pharisees, that you're about to do something good. We see pride. We talked about this a lot this morning in the Bible class. We see pride when you've got the attitude that it's my way or the highway. Now, I don't care if all the other evidence is against me. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. We're going to do it my way. And that's the type of love we talked about this morning, the insistent type of love. The love that my old King James says, seeketh not her own. This is an aspect of pride that seeks always your own. That wants it always to be your way. I found a story that I think will illustrate this. It's an actual, this comes from an actual newspaper and an actual conversation between United States naval authorities and Canadian naval authorities. And so this is just a transcript of their conversation. And I will read it out. When I say Americans, that's the Americans, the naval authorities talking. And Canadians, when I say Canadians, that's the Canadian naval authorities talking. This was October 1995. Canadians, please divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. Americans, recommend that you divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. Canadians, negative. You will have to divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. Americans, this is the captain of the United States Navy ship. I say again that you divert your course. Canadians, no, I say again, you divert your course. Americans, this is an aircraft carrier, United States Lincoln, the second largest ship in the United States Atlantic Fleet. We are a company with 3 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and numerous support vessels. I demand that you change your course 15 degrees north. I say that's 1.5 degrees north or countermeasure will be undertaken to ensure the safety of this ship. Canadians, this is a lighthouse. Your call. We often see that we often see pride being displayed. That we are going to have it our way. That we're going to do do it the way we want to do it. And it's our way or the highway. When we're really the ship trying to argue with the lighthouse. He can't move 950 degrees to the north or to the south. But we've got this idea with pride that it's my way. That's pride. It's pride that doesn't consider how it actually affects others. We'll double park in the crowded parking lot because if we have a parking space, who cares if somebody else is affected by it? It's pride that cuts line, that expects special treatment because after all, I deserve better than everybody else. It's pride that makes fun of our classmates, our co-workers, and our family members because after all, they're saying those people are just not as good as me. It's pride that doesn't bother coming to worship because I have better things to do than worship God. It is pride that doesn't read God's Word because I'm so educated, so enlightened, and so intelligent that I know better than God. It is pride that believes ourselves to be so rich, so wise, and so powerful that we no longer need God and instead place up our own great golden image to ourselves and to mankind. Now you can live that way if you want. And most people in the world do live that way. But I'm here to tell you, and I feel obligated to tell you, that the price of pride is high. In Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, who had exalted himself, was cast down from his throne. In the same hour, he was out in the field, eating grass with the beasts, and being wet with dew from the dew of the ground. In Daniel chapter 5, that same night, Belshazzar, who had been lifted up with pride, who had his kingdom taken away from him and was overthrown in his kingdom. In Proverbs 15 and verse 25, we read that God destroys the proud. Proverbs 29 and verse 23, pride brings you low. Mark 7, 22 to 23, pride defiles a man. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 6, pride causes us to fall into the snare, into the condemnation of the devil. And what we all know, Proverbs 16, 18 to 19, is that pride goeth for the destruction. A haughty spirit goeth for the fall. It is better to be humble in spirit and low than divide and spoil. Pride, therefore, is a directional sin. The sin of in and the sin of up. But what goes up must come down. And it is crucial that we guard our hearts from being inflicted with the sin of pride. Now, the Christian is not lifted up with the sin of pride. The Christian is low with humility. Look over at 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning in verse 5. Peter tells the Christians there to be clothed with humility because God resists the proud but giveth grace to the humble. Now the word there for humility, often translated as low, is a very interesting word. If you look it up in many word studies, you'll find that it has a great history. The word translated as humility in this context is a word that was not in existence. It was a word that had no meaning. The Christian virtue of humility was not used before the Christian era. It is a distinct outgrowth of the gospel, and it is based on this teaching of Christ. To understand your correct relationship to God, to your fellow man, and your actual smallness, your littleness in relation to all of these other things. That's humility under the Scripture. Now we see humility as bound up in the concept of what it truly means to be a Christian. We'll look over Matthew 22, beginning in verse 36. In this context, there's a lawyer. These pesky lawyers are always giving away. There's a lawyer who comes up to Jesus and tries to trick him. He says, Master, what is the greatest command? And Jesus says that the greatest command is to love the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. He says this is the first and the greatest command. But the proud man cannot fulfill this first and greatest command. Because instead of loving the Lord with all of his heart, soul, and mind, the proud man loves self with all of his heart, with all of his soul, with all of his mind, and has no room to put God first in his life. The Christian must raise up God. The Christian must give God the preeminence in his life. Rather than find whatever you do to be more important, you must find